Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our uh, NorthStar Community online service. It's so exciting to be here, and so glad you guys are joining me. I always make the assumption that if you're sitting here listening to me, you've got stuff going on in your life. Your hurts, habits, and hang-ups are creating issues for you. And so one of our goals here is to help us to become aware of that, to become aware of how we're living our lives from a hurt point of view, a traumatized point of view, a confused point of view, all those things. And the goal is if once we become aware of what we're doing, then we can start living our lives in a much better way. And our goal is always to, at the end of the day, to have a rich, full, meaningful life. We never will truly ever get there, but at least we can try. And you know what I see with a lot of people is we start to get glimpses of what a rich, full, meaningful life is. For many of us, we have never known anything but chaos and hurt and harm and all the stuff that goes with that. And the thing that we know is that all of you that are listening right now, you're here because you either are on the road to recovery and you want to keep going that way, or you're at least starting to wonder if maybe there are other ways to live. So today we're going to talk about overcoming toxic shame. This is such an important subject. It is one that is so relevant to our recovery, and we have to come to understand how toxic shame becomes part of us if we're not careful. And what that does is we start living our lives based on that. And that's an unfortunate way to go. But think about it. For many of us, we've had trauma in our lives. We've had childhood trauma. A lot of us grew up with complex PTSD. We were in a situation where we were in an abusive situation that we couldn't get away from. So it's kind of hard for us to not have toxic shame. And for many of us, again, we have a legacy of toxic shame. Our parents had toxic shame. Their parents had toxic. You can just go on and on. And this is the beauty of recovery is we can stop some of this. We can stop some of this generational stuff and move on to not pass that on to our kids or our grandkids or whoever in our lives. And it actually can happen. It really can, but it's hard. So I'll use an example. I'll use me for an example today. So I always ask people, I'll say, what labels were you given as a child that create shame in you? What were you told? So for me, one of the biggest problems I have in my life from a addiction point of view is I'm a workaholic. If I'm not working 70 or 80 hours a week, I feel like in some way I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do. If I'm sitting around and not doing something, I feel inadequate. I feel there's something wrong with me. So for me, so you can say, well, I mean, let's face it, in America, we kind of like workaholics, but it has its price. My children haven't had me when they should have at times. My wife, of course, has had to experience my inadequacy through workaholism and takes away time and energy from us as a family. All those kind of things. Those create issues. And it having a workaholic mindset, it's difficult to have a rich, full, meaningful life because I'm always seeing myself as inadequate and there's something wrong with me. So where did it come from? So I grew up on a farm. And I say this with humor, but I grew up on a dairy farm. So every day, twice a day, we were expected to milk cows. 4:30 in the morning, 3:30 in the afternoon, no matter what we were doing. So it's always been kind of a, family humor about that. And I, can remember Sundays out playing football with friends and it's now 3:15, I got to go. Now, to be honest with you, the actual act of milking, I actually kind of didn't mind. I kind of liked it almost. I had the radio on, the cows coming in, hour and a half, 2 hours of milking. We milked about 80 cows, and Um, so it was quite a production. But I grew up on a farm, and my dad was awesome. He was a great parent. My mom was a great parent. But my dad had workaholism in him. He obviously was struggling with that for his own identity. And my mother was just always kind of just struggled with confidence and saw herself as never enough. So when I was, so I loved to read. I loved sports. I wasn't lazy, but that's what I was labeled as, was lazy. And so I carry that with me everywhere I go. I have to fight that all the time to not see myself as being lazy. When the fact is, I work a lot of hours. I do a lot of things. And the good news is what I do, I love all the things I do. But if I'm doing it because of my toxic shame, because of my feelings of inadequacy, then I'm not going to have a rich, full, meaningful life. Or I may have a rich, full, meaningful life, but I won't enjoy it. So that's a small example, but I think a lot of you can relate to it. What was those labels? Were you labeled as ugly? Were you labeled as fat? Were you labeled as stupid? Were you labeled as maybe poor white trash? I don't know. What were you labeled as? You carry that with you into your adulthood. And if you don't see it, then this toxic shame will take over your life, and then hurts, habits, and hang-ups become wildly appealing. So understanding toxic shame is so vital to us recovering. Because what's one of the bottom lines to addiction is we loathe ourselves. Well, guess what? Toxic shame helps us do that. It's the vehicle for us to loathe ourselves. How many of you said, let me rephrase that. I hear it from so many people. They'll say, as a kid, I just never felt like I fit in. There was something different about me. There was something odd about me. There was something whatever. Well, that's a pretty heavy burden. The fact is we probably all thought that, but we really do see ourselves as we didn't connect. We didn't fit in. And so we carry that with us. And then so we have kind of this thing where we either we underfunction or we overfunction. But the fact is, what we really want is a rich, full, meaningful life. Overfunctioning, underfunctioning, neither one of those allow us to do that. So toxic shame really is the anti-rich, full, meaningful life. So when we talk about it, so let's make sure we understand what we're talking about here. So healthy shame is normal and necessary. I always, I've known people who were either married to or parents, children of parent or whatever, of someone who was sociopathic. Well, who's a sociopath? A sociopath is someone who sees other people as objects to be manipulated and used for their advantage or their good. They do not understand love. They tend to be very brash and exciting, but they don't understand love. And they don't understand how to connect with people in ways that are satisfying. Nobody wants that. So the fact that you're sitting here tells me that you have healthy shame. You have shame about you, but you also have shame about things you do, and that's the big thing here. Is healthy shame is important. We need shame in our lives to keep us on the right track, to keep us connecting with people, to connect with ourselves, to be good and decent people. Toxic shame goes too far, and it becomes our identity. So that's the difference. So a couple quotes here. Shame is healthy and necessary. It has purpose. We feel shame when we make a mistake or we act in a way that contradicts our values. Or more simply, we feel shame when we do something wrong. It's a good thing. I don't like having shame. I don't like feeling guilt. I don't like feeling bad about things I've done to harm people. But I need that, so I won't keep doing it. Shame is here to help us to not make the same mistakes twice, right? It's an unpleasant feeling. We don't like it. And that acts as a deterrent to stop doing the same wrong thing again and again. It makes us feel bad, and so it should, because that's what helps us to grow into better people. not bitter people, better people. We want to avoid that bad feeling. That's what drives us. So I'm going to read from Psalms 139. Again, this is the Message version. This is David talking. And when you understand David's life, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but David, I always describe him as he was as good as he was bad. That man caused more problems, created more chaos, and then at the same time was great, awesome, all those things. But the one thing that made David, I think, why he is so powerful of a story and why, the quote is David was a man after God's own heart, was David had a lot of shame. He felt bad when he did things wrong. So Psalms 139 is probably written by David after he's been confronted about what he did with Bathsheba, where he had an affair with her and then had her husband killed. So, yeah, this is one of those moments where he needs to be feeling lots of shame. So he goes, God, investigate my life, get all the facts firsthand. I'm an open book to you, even from a distance, you know what I'm thinking. You know when I leave and where I get back, and when I get back. I'm never out of your sight. You know everything I'm going to say before I start the first sentence. I look behind me and you're there, then up ahead and you're there too. Your reassuring presence coming and going. This is too much, too wonderful. I can't take it all in. So you hear how that's a positive way of looking at God being in our lives, because I don't have a lot of toxic shame. If I had toxic shame, I'd be saying, I don't want you looking at my life. I don't want you seeing what's going on in my life. And then I'm going to skip through, and then at the end of Psalms 139, he goes, investigate my life, O God. Find out everything about me. Cross-examine and test me. Get a clear picture of what I'm about. See for yourself whether I've done anything wrong. Then guide me on the road to eternal life. Very good. So let's talk about toxic shame. Oh my goodness, toxic shame is so deadly. Toxic shame is, one writer says, it's just normal shame that has stopped functioning in a healthy way. And we've started to apply it to our very inner being. So what amounts to our toxic shame becomes us. It's shame that's been internalized, transferred from the conscious to the subconscious. Think about it. We grew up as children in abusive situations. We grew up being maybe sexually abused. All those things. What we did was we internalized what should have been anger and towards someone else, and we just took it all in, and we internalized it, and we became very toxic in how we saw ourselves. And a couple ways that we do toxic shame. One is that we take every bit of shame in our lives and we magnify it and we internalize it. We accept our low status and we find ways to cope with it, and feeling worthless or subhuman or simply giving up or surrendering to the sense of inadequacy is one thing we can do. We start to live an awful life because the shame is accepted, magnified, and internalized. The second one, and this one I really relate to, is the never enough. The never enough way is where we suppress healthy, conscious shame, block it out, ignore it, push it aside, and deny it. This makes us feel like we are never enough at anything we do. Our goals aren't, no matter how good I do, I could have done better. I could have done it different. And part of that's good, right? But when I internalize it and I never enjoy anything I do, I'm always seeing myself as not smart enough. I could have done it different. Could have said it different. Could have all these blah blah blah. It takes away the joy in life. So that's how never enough kills us. So there's three ways we live our shame, and so I'm going to go through this real fast. The first one is atrophists, and this means that we grow up seeing ourselves as different in a flawed way. And what we do is we slowly decay from within. The toxic shame just continues to tear us down. We come to we come to see ourselves in worthless ways and how everybody else is so much better. And what we do is then we withdraw from life. We don't expect anything. We just continue to do things to harm ourselves. And so we just slowly heap anger and vitriol towards ourselves on and on and on. And maybe the best way to say is we never get out of our own way. We just keep sabotaging ourselves. And then there's the glass ceiling. Now, this one is we try to be good, but at the end of the day, we can only accept at best being mediocre. Anytime we rise above being mediocre, we actually had a good day, we'll do something to make sure we get back underneath that glass ceiling, and we'll make sure that we are mediocre at best. We become very uncomfortable and uneasy with doing well. We come to live our lives thoroughly average. How's that sound? Not average, thoroughly average. There's nothing wrong. Again, make sure you hear me. I am not talking about we all have to be super achievers, because a lot of super achievers got tons of toxic shame in them. But what I'm talking about is we don't allow ourselves to enjoy life in any way because we want to stay safe. We want to stay in this mediocre world of safeness. And what happens is we really become uncomfortable everywhere. We don't ever find a place where we can be comfortable. And then, of course, we talked about never enough. But this is a sense of inadequacy, I can talk today, that makes us feel that we always need to be improving. We're just not enough. We don't know enough. We don't know the right things. Blah, blah, blah. We don't do the right things. We should do other things. And we try to do everything right and never make mistakes. We're driven with this burning need to improve and to become good enough one day. And that's the key. So, I can always learn more. I can always be better. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about this driving need because of how we hate ourselves, because we are not enough. That's the big difference. So we have to figure out ways to see ourselves as enough. And when we live with never enough, we will never be happy. We will withdraw from opportunities. We will not have a rich, full, meaningful life because we'll always see how we're not enough. So these things all create lots of problems. And so what we want to realize here is the one of the ways to overcome toxic shame is we have to see that, I hate to break it to us, but we're not God. Sorry. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to hurt people. We're going to be hurt. We're going to disappoint. We're going to disagree. All these things happen. But when we have toxic shame, we can become very inflexible because of ourselves, right? So shame helps us to take long, hard looks at ourselves. Maybe we'll be a little more careful next time. Maybe it can be a little bit more loving because we understand that people aren't like us. But if we start getting overconfident and carried away, then we make shame a problem. Toxic shame becomes a problem then. So what we have to realize is we do have limits. We all make mistakes, like I just said. We are not perfect. It's guaranteed. It's part of being human. And shame, again, will help keep us from doing the things we don't want to. And so I want to talk about limits briefly. This is important to understand about toxic shame. Healthy shame means we have realistic and healthy limits on our lives. We feel shame. It reminds us what we should and shouldn't do. Without shame, we don't have limits. Without healthy shame, we have no limits. So what happens? I either close down because of my toxic shame, or I live with grandeur and delusions of all these things with no limits. We create elaborate fictional fantasies of power, success, fame, glory, because we're not okay the way we are. You couldn't possibly love me if I'm not a hero. You couldn't possibly love me if I'm not doing everything right. You couldn't possibly love me if I'm not special and unique in some way. If we don't know our limits, we have no direction. We'll try to go everywhere at once, resulting in no net improvement. We might try to be the jack of all trades, and it'll be master of none. And that one I have to fight with, I'll be honest with you. I got to work on this one because I do want to know everything, and I do think I need to know everything. I don't need to know everything. It's like I always think of that quote by Albert Einstein. Supposedly said this. I'm not convinced it was him, but he said, "You watch a fish in water. It's a genius how it moves around. You go ask a fish to climb a tree. Looks pretty stupid." That's what but we have to accept. That's such a great, healthy shame moment. You can't be experts at everything, nor will you be. But we have God-given talents. We have things that we're better at than other people, and that's what we got to see. When we have toxic shame, all we do is we see the things we're not good at. And the thing is, with healthy shame, we can use our energy more effectively, and we won't waste our time on things we don't need to be trying to be great at. So toxic shame tells us that we are flawed, we have no limits, it becomes our core identity, it gives us a sense of worthlessness, it gives us a sense of failing and falling. Sounds like fun, doesn't it? I'm guessing a lot of us recognize it. So the limit issue, let's talk about this for a second. We either stifle our lives or we live with bravado. Neither one of them work very well, right? So here's some examples. So I see myself as this scrawny, weak little guy. So what do? I either withdraw and never get fit or get healthier, or I go to the gym every day for 4 hours and work myself to death and injure myself and everything else. Do you see the limit thing? I see myself as unlovable. So what do? I isolate. I'm miserable. I despise waking up every morning, blah, blah, blah. Or if I go the other side with no limits, then I quickly and constantly get myself into dysfunctional relationships. I overfunction. I give myself up. I throw myself into relationships that don't work. Do you see how this thing with limit works? Or how about people? I know people who are obese who I never see eat in public. They never eat in public. We'll be in a setting where there's lots of food. They never eat. But you can't be obese if you're not eating. But what do? We go home and we binge eat because we hate ourselves. We hate the loneliness. We hate that stuff. So we binge and we overeat. Or I see myself as odd and different, so I withdraw and I never, like I said, I'm in middle school, and I see myself as this odd, quirky kid, and so I hide from everybody. I got my digital device in front of my face, and I don't connect with people because I just can't stand myself. Or I go and say, you know what, when I get drinking and smoking weed and all this stuff, everybody likes me, so I'm going to just wham, So you see how this really kills us, or how about people, we all know this one, we feel very weak about ourselves because of our toxic shame. We don't feel like we're strong. We feel like we're nothing, right? And we're very meek and mild, but we get behind a laptop or a car, we become vicious and angry and mean because we know we can get away with it. Do you see, this is how the toxic shame works. I'm afraid to try new things because I'll fail and I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not smart enough, right? Or, like we talked about, I used to go out there and just go try to do everything and really don't do well at anything. So here's the key to toxic shame. You are human. Sorry. Hate to break it to you. You don't have to be extra special to be loved. You don't have to be everything to be loved. It's like I remember one time someone said to Bill Murray, the comedian, they said, man, I want to be rich and famous. And Bill Murray looked at him and said, just be rich. You don't want to be famous. It destroys your life. But in toxic shame, we deny, we hide, we blame, we resent. We don't fix because we're so resentful of ourselves. And sometimes I've seen people with toxic shame even act like they meant to do the things they did. But the thing is, we are the mistake. That's the problem. Toxic shame leads us to an avoidance of shaming situations. So we'll do everything to prevent mistakes, right? Or we won't care, and we'll just go out there and live our lives with this false bravado and become damaging and dangerous. I always think this kind of fits. You've heard me talk about the ACE, the Adverse Childhood Experiences, Experiences Survey, and one of the things that we talk about is statistically they've shown if you score a 6 or more out of 10 without intervention, you will die on average 20 years younger than someone who scores 0. Well, I think some toxic shame explains some of this, because if I'm scoring a 6 or more, I've had a tough childhood. And I pretty much assume you have toxic shame in you because of what you were told or not told, all the bad things you experienced, all the bad things you heard about you as a kid. And remember, as adults, we all think we can remember. We don't remember what it was like to be a kid. We don't remember at 8 years old when my parents were misbehaving and acting badly, if my parents were drinking or not coming home. We don't remember that we blamed ourselves for that. We forget that. We go at 45 and look back and go, oh, well, yeah, that was them. No, at 8 years old, you're blaming yourself. The reason your mom's treating you badly is because of you, how bad you are. And you're probably being told that, by the way. If your parents aren't coming home, or when they're home, they're not home, all that kind of stuff, it's all because of you. You have to understand that about kids. We're very egocentric as kids because we're still developing all that. So just remember that. That's where toxic shame comes from, so much of us. So I think the reason why a lot of people die younger is because of their toxic shame. They live with anger. They get out there and they get in fights. They drive too fast. They're living with this bravado. They're by themselves, and they hate themselves, and suicide becomes an attraction. All these things, I think, so much goes toxic shame. So what's key here is, it isn't what we have done or not done, and that's what we love to live with, is all that shame about what we should have done different, what we've done, blah, blah, blah. We cannot turn the clock back. I wish we could. Well, I probably wish we don't. But the fact is, for many of us, you did some things you shouldn't have. I get it. I did. I can't turn the clock back. I can't fix those things. But I can get healthier and respond differently. So it isn't what we have done or not done. It's how we have interpreted what we have done. That's what's the key to toxic shame. You need shame to feel bad when you do things you shouldn't. That's the point. God built that in us. But toxic shame doesn't work. All it does is tells you how loathsome, awful, terrible person you are. And that is not true. So there's some things we can do here to help us. One is self-compassion. Accept you are flawed and you're going to make mistakes. Accept God's grace and love for you. God loves you. He doesn't keep score. You're the one keeping score. Let go of perfectionism. Make mistakes. Make them, maybe strategic mistakes, but make them. I always think, one time I was working with a guy, and he always talked about this, so I like to use it too. You can break behaviors into 4 categories. We do the right thing for the right reasons. We do the right thing for the wrong reasons. We do the wrong thing for the right reasons, and we do the wrong thing for the wrong reasons, right? We have to understand that about a lot of the things we do. I've seen a lot of really good things done for the wrong reasons, trust me. But a lot of times we do the wrong things, but it wasn't for the wrong reasons. I don't think us acting out and doing things we shouldn't that are destructive, I don't see people in recovery as that was for the wrong reason. It's because you were trying to understand and live with the shame, the pain, the toxic feelings that you have about yourself. And so give yourselves a break. And the other thing you have to do with self-compassion is you have to live with gratitude. Write down those things you're grateful for every day. Write down something good that happened today. I know some days that's hard to find, but there's still something good. Get out there and exercise, pray, meditate, and do something nice for someone else. That's gratitude. The next one's interesting, I think, is worthless. We have to realize we're not worthless. That's easier said than done. There's a quote here. So, yes, you really might be inadequate in real life. I love this. People come up, they'll say, oh, I'm so bad, I've done this. If you've done those things, those are bad. You're not a bad person, but you've done some bad stuff. And your dislike for you is driving you to harm yourself. So, are you worthless? No. Are you inadequate in your life? Yeah, you might be. A lot of us out there are because of what we've gone through. So you really might be inadequate in real life. Your life has been a failure. It's because all along you've had this same feeling of not being good enough. from the first issues in childhood through adolescence, school, work, and now. It's spiraled downhill to the point where the issue is not what you feel bad, but that you literally are bad. Your life is literally inadequate. Hate to break it to you, but that's how we get better. Yeah, this is a quote from Connor McGonigal, and I just think that's so good. What if I really am worthless, right? What if I really am inadequate? Toxic shame may have created that in you. The harsh truth is, you may be in those ways. And again, toxic shame tells us that we are worthless. So guess what we did? I'm in middle school. I was told I'm fat. I'm told I'm ugly. I'm told I'm whatever, stupid. I'll never make it. Well, guess what? I internalize that. I buy that. I believe it. So guess what I do? I choose either to overcompensate and spend 3 hours a day in front of the mirror getting my hair just right and blah, blah, blah. I'm focusing on that one little zit on my head and all that. And so I don't connect in life. Or I just don't care anymore. Don't care anymore. You know what I mean? Think of the kids you see out there who have worked very hard to make their look not care. But they've worked very hard at it. So there are times, if we grow up with these things, there's a good chance we are inadequate because it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. We see ourselves unattractive. We quit taking care of ourselves. We create the reality we're unattractive. And I don't know about you guys, but there's really no one out there who's unattractive who cares, right? I've never seen anybody who cares is going to be attractive. But if we give up and we say we don't care, then we have kind of promoted that we are inadequate. So the idea is we have to understand this and face how we created these issues in our life where we don't care and how it's harmed us with toxic shame. We don't want to continue a long life of poor decision making. And that's why we have to face this. Insecurities. Insecurities are those things that we just see about ourselves. I mean, I don't know about you, particularly as an adult, but one of the most horrifying moments is when I accidentally hit my phone and the camera's on me now. Oh my goodness, I can't get it off fast enough, right? But I have a taekwondo school, and we have mirrors up. I'm not kidding you. The little kids, they cannot look at themselves enough in the mirrors. They will fight to be in it. If I say I'm going to take a picture of the group, oh my goodness, if they're not in it, they're devastated, they're insulted, they're moping around. When I have my adult students, all right, time for a picture, I got to force them in there to take the picture. It's a silly example of our insecurities, right? We see ourselves as old, as wrinkled, as ugly, as fat, whatever we do. So our insecurities, what happens is that we see ourselves as fundamentally flawed. And it's unchangeable. It's permanent. We will live this for the rest of our lives. And insecurities can be pretty brutal. And they are very difficult to overcome. But one of the things I always love to do, particularly like in our NorthStar meetings, I'll hear someone and they're just being so hard on themselves. And the rest of the group is showing nothing but support and compassion and understanding. And I'll say to that person, now, if such and such did what you did, what would you be saying to them? Well, I'd be showing them understanding and love. But man, we can't do that for ourselves. And we all have it. I've known people I know someone who their life almost got destroyed because of their toxic shame, because they got focused on their nose and they believed it was crooked, and it really became where they almost couldn't function. That's toxic shame. And so with your insecurities out there, everybody, let them go. I know it's easier said than done, but you got to realize you're doing it. Think about that list of insecurities you have. Chances are they're not near as bad as you think they are. And, of course, when we go through the list of maybe I am inadequate, maybe I do have these insecurities that are more than everybody else, and I'm I don't love myself. Well, guess what? What comes after that, of course, is addiction. And that's why you're all sitting here probably. Habitual behavior to avoid pain is my favorite definition of addiction. Now, that doesn't take into all the physiological stuff that happens once I get to a certain point. But the fact is, I loathe myself. I don't want to face my life. I don't want to see my insecurities. I don't want to see how I'm worthless. I don't want to see my inadequacies. I don't want to see all these things. So it's a pretty good way to go, is to do hurts, habits, and hang-ups to a point where they destroy my life. So remember, in our addictions, we look at things like, of course, substances, but we also got the compulsive behaviors, and we got the dysfunctional relationships we get into, where we can't tell toxic people to get out of our lives, or we're toxic for that matter. But think about compulsive behaviors for a second. If I loathe myself, I can't stand myself. I know people out there left and right who, when they feel depressed and awful about themselves, they go to social media to punish themselves, to feel even worse. They go out there and find all those smiling pictures of all those families that are all so happy, right? If you look on Facebook, you would swear everybody's happy and everybody's together and everybody's doing great. When the fact is, it's not true. I'm glad we have those moments, and we do have those moments. But again, I would tell you, when you start going to social media on a too regular of a schedule, you are harming yourself, and there's probably toxic shame going on there. So, conclusion today is that God loves you, and you're not God. If you get that through your head, life gets better. You do not have to be perfect, and you never will be. You will disappoint. You will disagree. You will hurt people. You will be hurt by other people. You will be harmed by other people. But at the end of the day, that doesn't define you. Find ways to connect with people. Get yourself into groups, support groups such as NorthStar or somewhere else. Talk to professionals. Face your pain. Face your toxic shame. Reduce the levels of your toxic shame. Get them back under control so you can live your life again. So you can live with limits. Limits that tell you you need to behave. Limits that tell you don't have to be everything. So I appreciate you joining me today. Toxic shame is I think such a valuable conversation and subject, and do something about it. Don't live in it. So we always at NorthStar, we meet on Fridays at 6:30, Wednesdays at 6:30, Sunday mornings at 9:30, and of course 11:15 on Sundays. For you that are local, I think we're going to be moving our meeting up to the multi-purpose room in the church, and that will, so you can come either from the back, you can park in the back of the church and go up the elevator, or you can park up front and find us in the hallway there. But either way, I'd love to have you guys come and help you fight through the toxic shame and reduce its effects on us so we can have a rich, full, meaningful life. And if you ever need to contact me, certainly you can. We're on our website at nscmechanicsville.com. All of our information is on there. You can call me at 804-746-5081, and you can catch me there. Or you can email me at csimpson@wgva.church. But anyway, I'm honored you joined me today. I don't have to be a workaholic. You don't have to have all your toxic shame either, but we got to work on it. So we always close with a prayer of serenity. And again, if we would just listen to this prayer, our lives would be so much easier. But let's go ahead and pray. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardships as the pathway to peace. Taking, as Jesus did, the sinful world as it is, not as I would have it. Trusting that Jesus will make all things right if I surrender to his will, that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy in the next. Amen. Thank you again for joining us.